Kate, I'm really, really excited to talk to you today for SHECAN. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
I am a 60-year-old feminist, mother and grandmother. I still haven't hung up my marching boots, but I'm also a woman who has spent her career standing beside other women. It seems to me the most important thing we can do is to support one another and to do that positively and with a lot of energy. I think there are two choices in the world. If you feel something isn't quite working or not quite right, you can moan about it or you can do something. And I always prefer to do something, but to try and do it with a smile on my face.
Incredible. I mean, you talk from my heart, Kate. Kate, I know you're obviously an award-winning novelist. You've written at least 9 books. You've got an incredible new book coming out about the history of extraordinary women. Tell us a little bit about your journey, Kate. When did you realize I'm good at that? I'm really interested in history. You're a master weaver. You weave so many things together in these incredibly big, powerful books. Tell us how you do that.
Well, I never wanted to be a writer. That wasn't what I thought. When I was growing up, I loved telling stories, but I thought I was going to do music. But I went to a big girls' comprehensive school in Sussex, 2,000 girls, and I was quite what we'd call in those days a SWAT. So I arrived early and left late in order to avoid the scary girls that, hung about the bus station smoking with boyfriends. And, I was not that kind of girl. At that stage. And I played in orchestras all the time and music, and that was the thing I loved. But I was always reading and always had that sense. I mean, I realize now looking back that when we were in the classroom, I did history at A level and music at A level and Latin actually at A level. And I did 4. What have I said? Latin, history, music, and English, of course. And I started to notice, but without knowing what I was seeing. Where were the women? You could do whole lessons where not a single woman was mentioned unless it was Queen Victoria or occasionally Jane Austen. And as for classical music, the only person who ever got mentioned were sisters, so Clara Schumann and Fanny Schumann. I didn't understand what I was seeing at the time, that there is only half the story being told, but I remember feeling it, thinking, this is just a bit odd. And it didn't match with the world around me. I was surrounded by girls. I had sisters. I had 2 extraordinary and wonderful parents who believed that we should do anything that we could and support us to do that. So I could see that what I was being taught didn't match up with my experience of the world. So it was always there. But it was only when I got to university that I started to have a framework and a construct and, discovered, as it were, feminism. And in those days, it was something called CR, consciousness raising. And I started to get involved in political organizations, such as Reclaim the Night, which was about why was it that women were blamed for not feeling safe at night? Hang on, it wasn't surely our responsibility to fix the people who were causing us to feel unhappy at night, and got involved in all these kind of ways. So I suppose my journey to being a writer was more the idea that with words, if women have the power to tell their own stories, then the whole of history, the whole story is told. And if women are silent, then only a partial story is told. And little by little, that led me to writing fiction. And within writing fiction, all of my historical fiction, they are love letters to Carcassonne in the southwest of France. But the heart of all of my fiction is unheard and underheard women's stories. And the fact that we were always there too. Women were always there too. And you can be forgiven sometimes when you read a history book for thinking that women were just sitting around doing embroidery and nothing else was happening. But it's never been true. And history is manipulated and used now, and in order to justify prejudice and bigotry now. So we just need to look at the situation in Afghanistan. Before the Taliban came back into power with their misogyny and their hatred of women, I would say, and girls, Afghanistan had more female politicians than any other country. So always when people start to talk about history and tradition in order to justify what they're doing, you need to go back to the history and go, you know what? That's not tradition. That's your interpretation because of what you want now. So all of my fiction, my non-fiction, my playwriting, in a way, is part of the same story. And my new book, Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries, is history completed. It's putting back 1,000 women whose names we should know.
1,000 women, I cannot wait.
Well, some of them are just mentioned in passing. There's just a quotation, and others have kind of potted biography. My real hope with the book is that mothers will buy it for their sons, husbands will buy it for their wives, that it's a book about women for men and women, and it's a celebration of incredible women. It's not a roar of anger or complaint, although there is anger and suggestions in there, but actually it's about celebration. But this is about all of us reclaiming the history of all of us, and that's what matters to me, that this is not a book for women, this is a book for everybody.
Which is a huge inspiration, Kate. And I really love that you mentioned that you really show women who came before us, who claimed and made changes. So I'm really super excited to read this book. Kate, I'd love to understand when did you think of writing a book like that? Did you sort of get to hear so many stories and then you thought, I can weave that into a beautiful big book? How did you come about writing this?
Well, there are two separate inspirations for Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries, both personal, but both, I think, relatable to many of the people who'll be listening today. So one of them was that I was publishing a novel, The City of Tears, which is set between 1572 and 1594. And it's part of a sequence of 4 books about the Huguenot diaspora, following many generations of women through one family, the Juvet family. And I like the public aspects of being an author. I love going to bookshops. I love meeting readers. I love people saying, well, I like this bit, or I didn't like that bit so much. That seems, for me, a novel is completed when it's in the reader's hands. I've done the writing, but the act of reading is what completes that relationship. And so I was publishing in January 2021 and everything was shut. And it was the lockdown in the UK that I think for many people was the most challenging, because there was no end in sight. And by this stage, we could see the craven political leadership, which was driven by greed and self-interest and not about public good. And I think a lot of people were quite despairing. So I thought, okay, I can't do a normal launch. But I thought, well, you know, what I can do is I'm just going to say to some friends, writer friends, tell me one woman from history you think should be better known or you'd like to celebrate. So the children's author and Bond author, Anthony Horowitz, said, Laskarina Bouboulina. And I said, who is she? And he said, oh, she's this incredible Greek admiral, the only woman who's ever been an admiral in the Russian fleet. And she led in the Wars of Independence in the 19th century. I said, that's amazing. Lee Child said, I'd like to recommend all the women at the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, and name some of the ones that he was most impressed by. The broadcaster, Claire Balding, said, Lily Parr. And I said, who's Lily Parr? And she said, oh, she's the most famous female footballer in the UK, the only female footballer to whom there's a statue. And the women's teams that played before the First World War were the most successful sports teams. But the FA resented the women being so successful, so they shut down the women's game. It was more successful than the men's game. And person after person suggested extraordinary women to me. And so then I thought, okay, I'll just put out on social media. I'll just do the same thing. Said anybody sitting there, let's celebrate some incredible women in these very dark days all over the world. So just tell me your person. You don't have to explain or justify it, just tell me. And within days, I had thousands of women and men from all over the world, from Saudi Arabia, from Russia, from China, all over the world. And I thought, this is great. I'm still an idealist. I still feel we should endeavor to leave the world better than when we found it, and we should care for it. And it gave me a great deal of hope, because it made me feel, well, actually, most people want to celebrate the great things. They want to celebrate people who've done amazing things. They don't want to rip it all down and drive wedges between people and say, well, because this person looks like that or lives there, they don't matter. So it gave me a great deal of hope in what was quite a dark time, I feel. And then, of course, I started to think, I'm learning so much. I can't believe, as a, campaigning feminist for all of these times, so many women I didn't know, which made me think about, what about all the other women? And out of that, I thought, I'd like to write a book and gather them together in the book. But there are lots of books like that. And this is really important. There's great people doing great work in this field, not least of all on this day, She, and things like you're doing here. So what was it that I could add that was different to what there was already there? It's not just a list of names. And then I discovered during lockdown that my own great grandmother had been a really famous novelist in her day. I did not know this. I knew she'd written. It was always described as she wrote. And when I started to research her history, Lily Watson, who was born in 1849 and died in 1932, despite the fact that she was a best-selling author, despite the fact that she was a privileged white middle-class woman living in London with a great deal of benefit in her life, that she has completely disappeared from the record. You can't find any reference to her anyway. And so I thought, if a woman like that can disappear, what about everybody else? So those two inspirations came together to make the book. And the book is divided into subject areas. So conservationists, women of peace, women of faith, women of war. And in between those are chapters about my detective story into my great-grandmother, Lily, in whose footsteps I walk. And I discovered that her real name, her given name, was Martha. My daughter is Martha. But I hadn't known that.
Kate, you're making me cry. This is so
I know.
Powerful.
It's so, so it was just like, okay, I've got to write the story. I've got to write the story of my own family and all the hidden women, the quiet women who don't get recorded. And, it's a terrible statistic, but 90% of people who post on Wikipedia, which I think is a wonderful thing, but 90% are men. Now, the minute you do that, you think, okay, well, then women are still not being written up in the same ways. But, the strapline of the book, if you like, is history completed. And I feel very passionate about that, because if we don't have the whole story, then we can't really interpret where we've come from and where we are now and where we could be. And that's, this is a book, as I said, to celebrate the people of the past and to honor their achievements. But it's also about how can we make things better. And we should be under no illusions. Things are, in many parts of the world, getting worse for women, not better. So we can't stand by. We can't stand by. We have to speak out.
Thank you for that, Kate. I obviously wholeheartedly agree with you, and it's time now, really, right now is the time to really make a change. And Kate, what do you think? I mean, it sounds to me as if you really are part detective. You're someone who goes and finds the truth and information and then weaves this into a book. What would you say is your superpower?
What is my superpower? Stamina, actually. I am really curious. I'm still quite wide-eyed about the marvels of the world and history and all of those things. And if I am trying to track something down, I don't give up. I don't give up. I keep going. And that's been my I suppose my philosophy for all of my career. When I'm setting up the Women's Prize for Fiction, every time a door was shut in my face, I found a different door. If the door is shut and they won't let you in, go around the back. So it's the idea that nothing that's worth anything has ever been easy. And it's why the book, I hope that people will share it and buy it for a school library and give it to their friends, because nothing that we have now has not been fought for by somebody. So I think that sort of stamina and persistence is kind of part of my superpower. But I also, at the risk of sounding a bit, Disney, I can find the joy in things, even when it does seem very dark. And I think as a working feminist, if you like, I feel more challenged and anxious about things at the moment than I have done for maybe 25, 30 years. because things that seem so secure are being taken away from women, whether it's education, whether it's bodily autonomy, whether it's just the sense of women's voices being equal. But at the same time, I think staying as positive as you can is really powerful, because I think anger really matters. Of course it does. And being angry and changing things and refusing to accept things. But at the same time, this is where I'm the quiet revolutionary rather than a warrior queen. I think that sometimes you can change people's minds, which can have enormous influence and effect on other people, by not going in with your fists raised, but by going and saying, okay, I understand why you're saying that, but what about thinking about it from this point of view? Now, it's easy for me to say I'm a white middle-class privileged woman who has had a great deal of support and opportunity in her life. Absolutely right. But therefore, I suppose my message to women is be yourself. Campaign to make things better for other women in the way you can do it best. And this is the way I can do it best.
Kate, thank you. You've preempted my next question. Top tips for other women, which I love. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I would say that it has always been women's lives. It's not about good women and bad men. It's about all the great women and men, and a system that's called patriarchy that doesn't benefit lovely men either. You know, I'm the mother of a son and a daughter and now a grandson. And so we all know that patriarchy as it is set up, and authoritarianism doesn't benefit anybody. Just it benefits the tiny number of people doing it. You can see this as we look at in the streets of Iran at the moment, where incredibly brave women are cutting their hair and taking off the hijab if they don't want to wear it, because it's about women's choice, and standing beside them are their brothers and their lovers and their fathers and their sons. So patriarchy is a system that doesn't benefit anybody. But what we have to do, therefore, is know that patriarchy seeks to drive a wedge between women. It seeks to set women up against one another, saying that this happens to this woman because they're not like you. So we need to have our eyes open to that and stand shoulder to shoulder. You know, sisterhood works, even with women you don't agree with or you don't like. It's not about likability, it's about fairness. The F word is fairness. The other thing, which is a more practical tip, is if you're invited to do something, to speak on a platform, to join a council, to be in, you know, whatever it is, and you cannot do it, never put the phone down without recommending another woman. Because if every woman recommends another woman, then before we know it, there'll be more of us. And that's how things change. One woman makes two, two makes four, four makes eight, and so on. And I think the final thing is allow other women their choices. You might want to be someone like me who works full time and always has done and always will. But there are other women who are in a position to, or have chosen to be full-time caregivers or homemakers. Don't fall into the trap of allowing yourself to judge other women, unless they've done something completely terrible. I mean, just in general choices. You know, respect difference, respect other people's right to choose differently from you, but campaign for what you believe in. And, you know, I was brought up by my mother and father who just simply thought that the more you put in, the more you got back. And I think that's, you know, advice to live by. And my parents were very much people of their age and their time. And my dad was a very old-fashioned chap, but could not have been more proud. And neither could my ma. So I think it's that idea. Do what change you can do in the world, whether it's little or small, everything makes a difference.
Thank you for these incredibly powerful tips. I mean, I feel almost your life is guided in some sort of a way, Kate, because if I listen to you, these, you know, you put so much in, you get an enormous amount out, and that shows this passion, this shows in your books, and I really am so grateful, because that really is much more than writing a book. It's really a service to mankind, and especially the times we live in, as you said, it doesn't seem to get any easier, and I think we all have to now stand up and look for this inspiration to take us to where we need to go and to dismantle a system that clearly isn't working in anyone's favor. Kate, my last question would be, what are your dreams or plans or hopes for your future?
Well, do you know, it sounds odd, but I've never really thought in those terms. I've always thought about if an opportunity's come along or there's something that I felt that I wanted to do, I've done that. I've never been somebody who's had a 1-year goal, a 2-year goal, a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal. And I've never, ever thought, where do I see myself in X number of years' time? The thing I feel now, I'm in my 60s, is I don't want to run out of time. So I do feel that I don't want to run out of time. I'm not done. You know, I don't feel done. But I also think that it's really important to have new experiences. So I love writing my novels. I love readers. I feel very grateful every time I have a book out that people want to buy it and read it and borrow it from the library and all of those things. But I also don't want to not challenge myself. So what I'm about to do, Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries comes out on the 13th of October, and I hope it will be a book that will sit there for a long time. And we're trying to work with schools to make sure that every sixth form college has got a copy, because it starts young, these things. But actually what I'm doing next year, and this is a new career at 61, is I am devising a one-woman show and I'm going on tour. I'm doing a theatre tour, 6 weeks in the spring and 6 weeks in the autumn, all around the UK. With Warrior Queens, and it will be a show with music and lights and props and a stage set and stuff. And I love theatre, but I do a lot of public speaking, but I'm not a performer. My son is an actor, actually, but this feels very exciting and very nerve-wracking. But this is, I suppose, the way that I live, which is not the project after this or the one after that, but okay, I'm going to try something completely new, and it might be awful and I might not be very good at it and people might not come, and that will be, of course, upsetting and humiliating. But is it better? It's the wonderful Samuel Beckett quote, which is always misquoted, and it's crucial. All the words are there: try again, fail again, never mind, fail better. So we'll see. All the dates will be up on my website. So here I am, one woman show about to start in March.
I can't wait. Kate, thank you so much for talking to us today. You're unbelievably inspiring.
Thank you. It's been lovely to meet you.